Phyllo pastry is extremely difficult to make, so I'll leave that to the professionals. Very, 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 very thin, almost like paper. And you can find it, almost every grocery store will have it in the frozen section. And see how thin it is, really, really, really thin dough. And it's great to sort of make these quick sort of pies or dishes on the fly. And it's a little lighter than like a pie crust. It's got a really nice flakiness. You'll see it in a lot of Greek dishes as well, pastries and sweet and savory. And so what we're doing is we're just using about 5 sheets of this phyllo into, I just have a baking dish. You can use a pie dish, doesn't really matter. It's not meant to be sort of perfect. You just kind of stuff it in there. And I did a few ahead of time. And all you do is just add maybe just like 1/4 teaspoon of olive oil and just brush it, and then add your next layer like this. And if you don't have a pastry brush, you can use like a spoon too, or your hands, which is I think what most of us end up resorting to anyways. And that's it, and just sort of fit it into the corners. And then for our filling, so we're making, this is a fairly simple ricotta filling. We're using eggs, so it's almost has like a custardy feel to it. And when it bakes, it'll come out a little bit firmer than if we were just to use the cheese. The egg sort of helps to keep everything together. So we're gonna use 2 eggs. These are refrigerated, there we go. So I find it easier to crack on a flat surface versus a corner. I know sometimes we learn to crack on the corner of your cutting board or your counter or the bowl. That actually pushes the shells into the egg, and that's sometimes where you get little fragments. If you crack it, give it a nice little crack on a flat surface, actually makes it a little easier, and you'll have less eggshells to deal with. Okay, so 2 eggs in. Whisk it up. We're gonna use, I made this recipe so that you're using pretty much 1 of these tubs of ricotta in there. That way you're not using half, or you have to use 1 1/2. And they have the light versions and they have the full fat versions as well. You can use either or. Some of the lighter versions will have more moisture, more water content. So if you want, you can actually strain a little bit of that water out ahead of time. It'll just make the dish a little less soggy. So ricotta goes in. We're just gonna mix this up. And we're gonna season it. And I guess this is when you can reach to some of those fresh herbs in the garden. What's one of the first herbs you think of when we talk about tomatoes?
Basil.
Basil, yeah. We can go with basil. We can go with basil. You can say basil. Absolutely. I think this is very fragrant, very aromatic. It grows really well together with tomatoes in the garden. And I know there's a few chefs that say what grows together goes together. So a lot of dishes are composed, from just the ground itself. So tomatoes and basil, we always plant them together. I don't know if it's just a superstitious thing or whatever, but they seem to work and grow well together. So I have our basil leaves, and what we're going to do here, you can just tear them up like this by hand. It's probably how my grandmother used to do it. The knife was taken out very rarely. If you can do it with your hands, you might as well do it with your hands. But if you want to get a really nice sort of thin slice on it, we're going to do what's called a chiffonade. Yes, I've seen some people. So chiffonade, really simple. Move this out of the way so you can see. We're going to stack our basil leaves on top of each other. Grab one end and then just roll it tightly. And then with a sharp knife, it works best with a sharp knife just because there's less bruising involved and you get a really nice slice out of it. And you can just slowly make your way down that stack of basil. And this works really well with any soft herbs. And then you sort of have these nice little ribbons of basil. So, chiffonade or hands, it's up to you. So that's going to get stirred in. And then one last thing, and this is, again, something that I remember from the kitchen and when I was young, is the smell of lemon zest. And we're not using the juice of the lemon in the egg, but just the zest. The zest is where it has all those concentrated lemon oils. We love using it in dishes when we don't want to use the acid. If maybe the acid is a little too bothersome, or if with cheese we just don't want to mix something acidic with the cheese. We use the zest and we get this beautiful, fragrant flavor and aroma in the dish. And what I'm using to remove the zest, does anyone know what this is? This is one of our favorite, microplane or rasp. It's sort of this micro grater with these little fine blades. This is one tool that I recommend if you don't have, get this tool. It's not only great for lemon zest or other types of zest, but it makes really fine work of garlic, minced. You can do ginger, you can do spices, hard cheeses, really in a much more efficient way than you would be able to do with anything else. So lemon zest in, pinch of salt, and that's going to go into our phyllo. Now, if you're making this entire dish for yourself, maybe don't eat it in one sitting. This freezes really well after it's cooked. Now, ricotta cheese, a lot of soft cheeses, add yogurt, any sort of soft dairy. The water will separate once you freeze it a little bit. So this freezes and it's great to cut up, throw it in the oven, you're good to go. You may just notice a little bit of moisture sort of separating from it, which is nothing to worry about, it happens. All right, so the ricotta is in. And then with your tomatoes on top. Now I cut some tomatoes ahead of time. And what I suggest is you do the same just to remove some of that excess moisture. So I slice your tomatoes, put them in a bowl. You can do this ahead of time and just add a little pinch of salt, almost like you're making a tomato salad. And then you'll notice, it doesn't take long, in about 2 minutes, can you guys see all of that liquid coming out of it? So we don't want that liquid on top of here because it's gonna make it soggy. So that liquid will stay at the bottom and you can just add the slices on top. That is gold. That liquid is so tasty. We used to just pour it on a little bit of toast and eat it. It is delicious. You can make different dressings, salad dressings, just out of that liquid as well. So no reason to throw it away, but we just don't want it in here, otherwise it's going to make the dish a little soggy. So these slices I'm going to put on top, and you can make it as colorful as you want. Beautiful. And this is going to go into the oven. It's done. So that's going to go into the oven 400 degrees for about 25 to 30 minutes. You'll notice the phyllo's gonna get really nice and dark and golden brown. And the tomatoes will start to shrivel up a little bit, but what we want is the egg in the ricotta mixture to sort of set. And when you move it around, you'll see sort of like this little jello action going on. That's when you know it's good to go. So some of the darker edges, yeah, I just snap off. You can fold it in if you want, but I just want to make sure that there's nothing trapping the or covering the ricotta. I want to make sure it cooks evenly throughout. But that's it. That's our tomato ricotta tart. Sound good? Yeah?